The first dispatches seemed almost impossible to believe. On the morning of October 6, 1941, near the small settlement of Matsensk, German tank operators peered through their sights and confronted a sight unlike anything they had encountered. Shapes, unfamiliar and low to the ground, carved through mud as if the earth itself offered no resistance. A Panzer III commander fired, anticipating the usual outcome. The shell struck. The Soviet vehicle did not falter. It pressed on relentlessly, unmoved by the impact. Silence gripped the German turret, interrupted only by the mechanical hum and the dawning realization. Something unprecedented was advancing toward them. Only months earlier, in June 1941, German troops had swept into Soviet territory with confidence teetering on arrogance. Operation Barbarossa commenced at dawn on June 22nd, spanning an almost 3,000-kilometer front. The Wehrmacht had already crushed Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France with astonishing speed. Their armored divisions, the famed Panzer units, were celebrated as the pinnacle of modern warfare. Commanders like General Heinz Darien relied on rapid maneuvers, precise coordination, and shock tactics, which, for a time, seemed invincible. In those initial weeks, German forces advanced with breathtaking momentum. Entire Soviet formations were encircled and annihilated. Cities succumbed one after another. Minsk fell by June 28th, Smolensk by July, and hundreds of thousands of Red Army troops were captured. Reports from German officers dismissed Soviet tanks as outdated, fragile, and poorly utilized. Early Soviet models such as the T-26 and BT series were indeed lightly armored, and German anti-tank weapons cut through them with ease. This growing confidence, however, concealed a fatal oversight. German high command underestimated the scale of Soviet industrial power, the resilience of its forces, and above all, the ingenuity hidden within Soviet design bureaus. They assumed they had already witnessed the full extent of Soviet capabilities. That misjudgment would soon exact a heavy price. Long before the invasion, engineers like Mikhail Koskin and Alexander Morozov had quietly revolutionized armored warfare. In the late 1930s, they embarked on designing a new tank to supplant the older models. Their vision was audacious, yet clear. A vehicle fast enough to maneuver across any terrain, capable of enduring enemy fire, and suitable for mass production. It had to perform in snow, mud, and bitter cold. It needed simplicity for manufacturing, but strength to confront the most advanced German machines. Koskin personally undertook a grueling test in early 1940, driving prototypes from Kharkov to Moscow and back, covering nearly 2,000 kilometers. The trials proved the tank's endurance, though Koskin fell gravely ill and later died. Still, his design survived and gained approval. This vehicle would become known as the T-34. By late September 1941, German forces were nearing Moscow. Autumn rains had turned roads into quagmires, slowing the advance, while supply lines stretched perilously thin. Yet the Germans pressed on, confident of imminent triumph. Their expectations shattered near Matsensk. The 4th Panzer Division, under General Major Willibald von Langermann and Erland Camp, moved into the village, anticipating an easy sweep of remaining Soviet defenses. Instead, they confronted the 4th Soviet Tank Brigade, commanded by Colonel Mikhail Katakov. Among Katakov's forces were the new T-34s, alongside the heavier KV-1s. These machines defied every German assumption. The initial encounter left German crews stunned. They fired at close range, expecting swift victories. Their standard 37mm anti-tank shells bounced harmlessly off the sloped, thick armor of the T-34s. Even larger 50mm guns struggled to inflict damage. Reports described shells ricocheting at angles never before encountered. Years of training and battlefield victories suddenly seemed irrelevant. Inside the Soviet tanks, crews faced their own hardships. Compartment space was tight, visibility limited, and early models required the commander to double as gunner, multiplying the burden in combat. Communication relied on shouted orders over the roar of engines. Despite these constraints, the crews pressed forward, understanding that their machines offered a rare advantage. The T-34 was more than a tank. It represented the convergence of design choices that fundamentally altered warfare. Its armor, angled to deflect incoming fire, provided superior protection. Wide tracks enabled traversal over mud and snow where German vehicles often faltered. Its 76.2mm gun could destroy German panzers at ranges where German guns struggled to respond. German commanders quickly recognized that they faced an adversary unlike any before. General Heinz Guderian himself chronicled the profound astonishment caused by the T-34. He remarked that German anti-tank weapons proved largely ineffective and that urgent tactical changes were essential. This challenge extended beyond individual battles. It struck at the core of strategy. Near Matsensk, Soviet units exploited the terrain with remarkas. Ambushes sprang from forest edges and hidden positions. T-34s would emerge suddenly, deliver firepower, and retreat before German forces could react. The mud compounded German difficulties. Tanks with narrower tracks struggled to navigate, while T-34s moved with surprising ease, seemingly gliding where others bogged down. One German officer recalled entire columns grinding to a halt because a few T-34s blocked a road. Flanking maneuvers often failed against difficult terrain, and direct assaults led to heavy casualties. The once unshakable confidence driving German advances began to fracture, impossible to ignore. The psychological toll was immediate. Crews accustomed to victories now confronted an enemy they could not simply overpower. Reports from the front spoke of fear and uncertainty. Hesitation crept in. Direct engagement with T-34s was avoided unless unavoidable. The rapid momentum defining German advances slowed. Yet the situation was not a simple tale of one tank triumphing over another. The T-34 had flaws. Early models offered poor optics, hampering target acquisition. Internal communication was limited. Many vehicles lacked radios, forcing commanders to rely on hand signals. Interiors were cramped and uncomfortable. Gearboxes were unreliable and crews struggled with maintenance. But on the battlefield, during critical encounters, the tank's advantages proved decisive. As October faded into November, German forces continued toward Moscow, yet their advance was no longer unstoppable. Soviet resistance stiffened. Reinforcements arrived from Siberia, dispatched after intelligence confirmed that Japan would not attack the Soviet Far East. These fresh troops were well equipped and trained for harsh winter conditions. The weather grew severe. Temperatures fell below freezing. Snow began to blanket the ground. German equipment, not built for extreme cold, faltered. Engines hesitated, weapons jammed, and soldiers suffered frostbite. Meanwhile, Soviet troops and their machines adapted more effectively. The T-34, with its diesel engine and broad tracks, thrived in the winter environment, operating where many German vehicles became immobile. This edge proved crucial. There were moments during that winter when entire German formations reported delays not from enemy fire, but from terrain and weather alone. In contrast, Soviet armored units pressed forward, launching sudden counterattacks that seemed to emerge from nowhere. One can almost imagine exhausted German soldiers hearing distant engines, uncertain whether relief or danger approached. On December 5th, 1941, the Red Army launched a massive counteroffensive near Moscow. Soviet forces pushed back against fatigued German units, halting the advance. For the first time, the Wehrmacht faced a significant retreat. The illusion of German invincibility shattered. Behind the lines, German engineers and commanders studied captured T-34s with a mixture of shock and admiration. The design was deceptively simple, yet highly effective. It was optimized for mass production without sacrificing key combat capabilities. One crucial revelation was the sloped armor, a concept German tank designers had not fully integrated before. Its effectiveness was immediately evident and influenced subsequent designs, including the Panther tank, which appeared in 1943. Internal debate surged within German command. Some argued that existing Panzer models were obsolete and required major redesigns. Others insisted that improved tactics could compensate. As reports continued to arrive from the front, it became clear that the T-34's impact could no longer be ignored. Yet, in 1941, these insights came too late. German forces were compelled to adapt rapidly. Heavier anti-tank weapons, such as the 88mm flak gun, originally intended for anti-aircraft use, proved effective against T-34s when deployed on the ground. However, these guns were limited at the front and required careful placement. Tactics evolved. German units learned to target weaker areas like the sides and rear, coordinating attacks with multiple units to overwhelm Soviet tanks. These changes, though necessary, required time, a resource in short supply. Meanwhile, Soviet industry operated at full capacity. Factories were relocated eastward, beyond the reach of German bombers, ensuring continued production of the T-34s and other critical war materiel. Entire production networks were dismantled and transported across thousands of kilometers. Workers reconstructed factories in remote locations, such as the Ural Mountains, often under grueling conditions. Despite constant shortages and relentless pressure, production did not stop. The T-34 emerged as the cornerstone of Soviet armored forces. Its design allowed mass production on a scale that mattered. By 1942, thousands of these tanks were rolling off assembly lines. They were not flawless, yet their sheer numbers made them decisive. The contrast was stark. On one side stood a highly trained, technologically advanced army scrambling to adjust to unexpected threats. On the other, an entire nation mobilized every resource to produce a weapon capable of shifting the war's momentum. The battles of 1942 and 1943 repeatedly underscored the significance of the T-34. At Stalingrad, Soviet tanks operated in the tight confines of urban warfare, supporting infantry in brutal close-quarters fighting. The city became a symbol of stubborn resistance. German forces, stretched thin and battered by continuous counterattacks, eventually found themselves encircled. During the November 1942 encirclement, Soviet armored units were pivotal in severing German supply lines. Fast-moving tank formations exploited gaps, linking up to complete the trap. It demonstrated how mobility, coordination, and sheer numbers could produce decisive results. By July 1943, at the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank engagement in history, both sides had absorbed lessons from previous clashes. Germany fielded new tanks, including the Panther and Tiger, partly to counter the T-34. These vehicles boasted more powerful guns and thicker armor, yet they were not without flaws. Early Panthers suffered from mechanical problems, while Tigers, although formidable, were complex and costly to build. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union continued mass-producing T-34s, including improved variants with enhanced firepower and features. At Kursk, the scale was staggering. Thousands of tanks collided across an immense front. Victory depended not only on individual designs, but also on strategy, logistics, and sheer numbers. Soviet defenses were layered, fortified with minefields, anti-tank guns, and multiple defensive lines that slowed German progress. When German units became exposed, Soviet armored reserves struck. Waves of T-34s counterattacked relentlessly, not always with perfect coordination, yet with unyielding pressure. The T-34 was central to the Soviet strategy. It might not have been the most sophisticated tank, but it was reliable, effective, and available in overwhelming numbers. Its balance of performance and mass production proved decisive. Looking back, German underestimation of Soviet armor in 1941 appears almost unbelievable. Yet, at the time, early encounters reinforced their confidence. Successive victories had built a sense of invincibility, and it is often in those moments of certainty that the most dramatic surprises emerge. The T-34 was more than a vehicle. It was a stark reminder that warfare is unpredictable, that assumptions can be dangerous, and that an underestimated enemy can alter the course of conflict. Picture that moment once more. Back at Matsensk, a German crew fires. The shell hits. The T-34 presses on. In that instant, the war quietly shifted. Every German commander recognized the battlefield had fundamentally changed. Each advance now carried greater risk. Each engagement demanded new thinking. For the Soviet Union, the T-34 became a symbol, not just of firepower, but of resilience, adaptation, and the capacity to endure and respond. By 1944, upgraded models such as the T-34-85 entered service. These tanks featured a more powerful 85mm gun and a redesigned turret allowing a dedicated commander, enhancing battlefield awareness and unit coordination. Even a successful design could evolve under pressure. These modernized tanks played crucial roles in subsequent offensives, including Operation Bagration in June 1944, when Soviet forces launched a massive strike that obliterated German Army Group Center. The speed and scale of this advance again highlighted the necessity of reliable, mobile armored units. By the final stages of the war in 1945, T-34s were pushing into German territory. They traversed cities and rivers, supporting infantry and breaking defensive lines. The same tank that had stunned German crews in 1941 now spearheaded the advance toward Berlin. By war's end, over 50,000 T-34s had been produced. They fought on every major front, from defending Moscow to the final push into Berlin. Their impact extended beyond individual battles, forcing the enemy to rethink strategies and designs. The T-34's story is about more than steel and firepower. It exemplifies how a single design, produced at the right time and under the right conditions, can shift the balance of an entire conflict. It all began with a moment of disbelief. A shell struck, yet the tank kept coming, altering reality in an instant. From that point onward, the T-34 was a symbol of Soviet ingenuity, determination, and the unpredictable nature of war. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.